On the night of 30th of December 2010 in Gainesville, Florida, in the United States, a 21-years-old lady, Saleha Huuda, drove to the apartment of her abusive and controlling boyfriend, a 24-years-old man named Antonio Drayton. At that time, the 24-years-old Antonio had been cheating on her with two women. That was a 42-years-old lady, Cassandra Kimbrough and Angela Olson. Salah went to Antonio's apartment to officially break off any kind of relationship that she had with him. While there, Antonio got angry that Saleha was leaving him for good, so an argument broke out. Antonio attacked Saleha and he strangled her to death. After killing her, he called his 42-years-old girlfriend, Cassandra Kimbrough, to help him dispose off Saleha Huuda's body. Cassandra came to his apartment. They placed the body inside the car, and they drove to a gas station and bought a gasoline. They took Saleha's body to a wooded area near the highway of the County Road 225 in Gainesville. They moved Saleha's body out of the trunk of her car. Cassandra poured gasoline on Saleha Huuda's body, and Antonio set it on fire so that he can conceal the evidence of the murder. While Saleha Huuda's body was burning, Antonio and Cassandra drove away thinking that they have escaped with the murder. Sometimes human beings can be so evil. This is the story of Saleha Huuda, a University of Florida student who was brutally murdered. Saleha Huuda was born on 27th of May 1989 in Ghana, which is a country in West Africa. Her parents were Ali and Hawa Huda. Saleha was the youngest child in the family. She had an elder brother who was known as Abdul and a sister known as Sean. When Saleha was about 5 years old, her family immigrated to the United States in search for better opportunities. While in the United States, they settled quickly at Gainesville, Florida, because some of their families lived there. Besides that, they also found a large West African community living there. Saleha Huuda was enrolled at P.K. Yong Developmental Research School in Gainesville, where she began her education. While in school, she involved herself in sports. She also did gymnastics. Saleha was tiny. She was barely 5 feet tall. She also developed a passion for dancing. She joined the dance group called Urban Essence Dance Team as a dancer. She also became the secretary of the group. The group was known for its great performance, and they even appeared on BET and MTV. Apart from that, Saleha wanted to become a cheerleader. Later on, after she was through with high school, she enrolled at Santa Fe College, where she immediately joined the Saints cheerleading squad. The Saints sports team were basketball players. After graduating from Santa Fe College, she joined the University of Florida in the year 2008. While there as a junior, she majored in family, youth, and community sciences. Later on, Saleha became a cheerleader on the university's competitive team. Saleha moved out into an off-campus apartment called the District Apartment Complex, where she stayed alone. In the year 2010, Saleha was in her senior year at the University of Florida. She was planning to go for nursing. That same year, Saleha met a 24-years-old man named Antonio Drayton at a club. They had a connection right away, and they would send each other messages on MySpace. The two would hang out together. Soon they started dating. Everything was perfect at the start. However, as time went on, Antonio became abusive and controlling towards Saleha. In January 2010, Antonio chased Saleha through a parking lot and pulled her hair. In June 2010, police were called to Saleha's apartment after Antonio had broken into her apartment, beat her up, choked her, and then robbed her. Antonio claimed that he was drunk at the time of the attack. However, Saleha refused to press charges against him, and so he was released from the police custody. Antonio started cheating on Saleha with several women. He started dating a 42-years-old lady known as Cassandra Kimbrough. Cassandra worked as a lab clerk. Their relationship was working perfectly, and soon they started engaging in sexual activities. Since Cassandra was financially stable, she always paid for Antonio's rent. She also always provided him with money and everything that he needed. Later on, Antonio started dating a third woman by the name of Angela Olson. Soon they fell in love with each other, and they entered into a romantic relationship. Unfortunately, in the fall of 2010, Saleha found out about Antonio's affair with Angela Olson. Saleha started sending threatening text messages to Angela. Things got more worse between the two. and later on they got involved in physical altercation. Things escalated between the two ladies, and in October 2010, Angela filed a restraining order against Saleha. Unfortunately, in November 2010, Saleha was arrested for violating the restraining order when she showed up at Antonio's house and encountered Angela. She was, however, released later on. After Saleha found out that Antonio had been cheating on her with several women, they engaged in a lot of fights and disagreements. Their relationship worsened and became more complicated, and Saleha could no longer trust her boyfriend. So after about 1.5 years of dating, Saleha broke up with her boyfriend, Antonio. However, after breaking up, the two decided to remain friends and they still would hook up. As time went by, the two would argue a lot and have a lot of trust issues, so Saleha realized that her friendship with Antonio was not working. Therefore, she needed to cut off any form of relationship with him. That same year, Saleha met a 21-year-old man named Mike Carter. The two clicked very well because they had a lot of things in common. Soon the two started dating. Later on, during the year 2010, university students went for the December holiday. Saleha and her family prepared well for the Christmas holiday, which they celebrated in high spirit. After the Christmas holiday, Saleha had a couple of weeks before she returned to school. So on 28th of that December, she hanged out with her boyfriend, Mike, in her apartment, and they spent that night together. The following day, Saleha and her boyfriend parted ways as she went to run some errands. Later that evening, she went to her parents' house where they had a good time. When night arrived, she reached out to her friend Indy. Indy was Saleha's best friend back at home, and they would always hang out during holidays. Saleha asked Indy if they could go out that night for some drinks and dancing, and Indy agreed. Saleha planned that after spending the night with her friend, Indy, she would go back to her apartment and hang out with her boyfriend, Mike. In the evening of December 29th, she picked up an insurance card she was looking for at her parents' house, and at around 6 p.m., her father saw her off as she left and headed back to her apartment. But instead of going to her apartment, she called Antonio. After they communicated over the phone, she went to Antonio's house to break things off with him for good. But while there, they got into a heated argument. Antonio got angry and jealous that Saleha was dumping him, so he got angry and he strangled her to death. After she was dead, Antonio called Cassandra and asked her to come to his apartment. Upon arriving, Cassandra was shocked to find that Antonio had killed Saleha. Antonio pleaded with her to help him get rid of the body because she was the only one whom he trusted. Cassandra agreed, and they wrapped up Saleha's body and placed it inside the trunk of her own car. With Cassandra driving Saleha's car, the pair drove to Antonio's brother's place in Stark. After arriving there, Cassandra waited outside in the car as Antonio went to his brother. Shortly, he came back with a gas can and a shovel. Then they drove to a gas station. While at the gas station, Cassandra hid her identity with a hood and a jacket. They bought a gasoline. After that, the two then drove to the desolate stretch of Highway 225, and while there, they pulled out Saleha's body out of the trunk of the car. Cassandra poured gasoline on top of Saleha's lifeless body, and Antonio set the body on fire so that he can conceal the evidence of the murder. Once Saleha's body was engulfed in flames, they headed back to Antonio's place and parked Saleha's car in the apartment complex across the street shortly before 3 a.m. on the 30th of December 2010. A mother and her daughter were driving on County Road 225 in Gainesville, about half a mile north of the Gainesville Raceway, when they spotted a fire burning in the wooded area near the highway. As they got closer, they saw what looked like a burning car on the side of the road. They assumed that it was a simple brush fire, so they called 911 and reported the incident. The fire department arrived. They began dousing the flames. But as the fire went out, firefighters discovered that this was not a brush fire. It was a burning body. So the firefighters called the police to the scene. Soon the police arrived at the scene, and they were able to determine that the body they found was of a female, and she had been badly burned. As they began to process the crime scene, they determined from the odor that gasoline had been used as an accelerant for the fire. They could also identify fragments of a blanket that the victim had been wrapped in. They also found a melted cell phone case and a paper napkin, which they sent to the lab for DNA testing. They also took the body for an autopsy. 2 days later, Saleha never showed up at her friend Indy's place. Indy had been texting Saleha's, but she never got a response. She then got a call from Saleha's mother. Saleha's mother asked her if she had heard from Saleha or seen her. She informed her that she has not heard from Saleha or seen her. She told Saleha's mother that they had plans to go spend out the night of Wednesday, December 29th, but Saleha's never showed up. Saleha's mother told Indy that they haven't heard from her either. They have been calling her, but they were unable to reach her. So, Saleha's parents went to the police station and filed a missing persons report. Hours after filing the report, the police went out to look for Saleha. The first place the police visited was her apartment. They spoke to a security guard at the apartment complex. The investigators discovered that the building she lived in used a digital passcode system. They asked the security about the last time Saleha was in the apartment. The security told the investigators that Saleha left her apartment on the evening of 29th of December, but she never returned. The security added that her car was also missing from the parking lot. A few minutes later, the landlord unlocked Saleha's door and the investigators entered inside the apartment. They heard a noise in the bathroom. When they slowly opened the bathroom door, they found Saleha's dog, Vegas. As the officers continued with their investigations, they didn't find any signs of struggle, foul play, or anything missing inside the apartment. When the officers got out of the apartment, they confirmed indeed that her 2001 Nissan Sentra car was missing. The investigators interviewed her neighbors. The neighbors said that they have heard arguments in Saleha's apartment several times. The man would yell at her, and their relationship was rocky. However, the neighbors didn't know who that man was. The investigators started interviewing Saleha's inner circles, so after learning that she had recently entered into a new relationship with a man named Mike, they brought him in for questioning. They asked him if he was the man who Saleha's neighbors had revealed was yelling and arguing with her at her apartment. Mike assured them that he was not the man who the neighbors were talking about. He told the investigators that Saleha had an ex-boyfriend whose initial name was A.D. He saw their conversations on text messages, and he knew that they were still in touch. Mike also revealed that on 28th of December, he spent the entire evening and night with Saleha at her apartment. However, the following day, Saleha had a busy schedule of running some errands. So she told him that she would come back home later that night so that they can meet up. Mike told the investigators that he waited for Saleha that evening for hours, but she never showed up. When midnight arrived and he still didn't heard from her, he got worried, and at around 1 to 1:30 a.m., he called her phone several times, but it kept going into voicemail. He called again at 1:45 a.m., and a strange woman picked up her phone. The woman told him that Saleha was asleep, so he should call her the following day. Mike told the investigators that he didn't know the woman who answered Saleha's phone, neither did he know what happened to Saleha. The investigators looked into Mike's phone records, and they confirmed that he was telling the truth, and he was ruled out as a suspect in Saleha's disappearance. A few days later, the autopsy results were out, even though the fingers were so badly charred. The medical examiner was able to pull one fingerprint, and they immediately ran it through the database because earlier on Saleha had been arrested and her fingerprints were recorded in the database. So they found a match in the system. The victim found in the brush fire was identified as Saleha Huuda. The medical examiner also discovered that Saleha died before she got burned, so the cause of her death was asphyxiation. They also matched 2 of her tattoos that could still be visible on her body with what her parents provided them in their description on the missing persons report. The investigators immediately informed Saleha's family about the death of their daughter. Her father was in great sorrow and shock after he heard the news. As the investigations continued, they found out that Saleha's ex-boyfriend, whose initial name was A.D., was actually Antonio Drayton, so they brought him in for questioning. Antonio told the investigators that Saleha had been ignoring him for weeks, but on the 29th of December, She texted him asking if she could come over to his house. Antonio told the police that Saleha never came and he never spoke to her again. He told the investigators that he was seeing a 42-year-old woman named Cassandra, and they were together on the night of the 29th December watching movies after Saleha didn't show up. Antonio told the investigators that he was dating several women at that time and that he was also in a relationship with a lady known as Angela Olson. As the investigations intensified, the police announced a $1,000 reward for any information relating to leads that would get them to an arrest. And they provide a Crime Stoppers number. They told the public about Saleha's titanium silver-color Nissan Sentra. The car had aftermarket headlights, aluminum rims, as well as a University of Florida cheerleading sticker in the rear window. And the license plate number was Florida Plate 778 HRB. Someone called the police on the afternoon of Monday, January 3rd, and said a car matching that exact description was parked outside their Turtle Oaks apartment for the last few days. The complex was about a 30-minute drive from where Saleha's body was located. The apartment was within walking distance of Antonio's home. The police arrived there and they run the tags, and the car was a 2001 silver Nissan Sentra, and it belongs to Saleha Huuda. Upon opening the back door, they see the purse on the back seat. The interior didn't have any blood drops or smears. They noticed the overwhelming smell of gasoline. When the investigators removed one of the floor mats from the back seat, it was completely saturated with gasoline. The entire floorboard was covered in gasoline. When they popped the trunk, they found pillowcases matching the comforter that Saleha's body was wrapped in. There were no fingerprints found in the car. The investigators visited every gas station between where Saleha's car was found and where her body was discovered. Fortunately, they were able to locate a surveillance footage of Saleha's car at a gas station in a nearby town of Stark, Florida. When the investigators reviewed the footage, they saw a woman getting out of Saleha's car from the driver's seat. She wore a hood to hide her identity. She then entered into a gas station and bought a $2 worth of gas, which she puts into a can before driving off from the gas station. The investigators were not done investigating Antonio as they continued interrogating him. Antonio fully cooperated with the police. He gave them his DNA samples, and he also handed over his cell phone to them. As the investigators looked into Antonio's cell phone records, they discovered that he had driven over to a nearby town of Stark, and his cell phone pinged off the towers in the Stark area. As the investigations continued, the investigators also discovered that on the night of 29th, many of the calls that Antonio made were to his brother CJ. So the investigators took in Antonio's brother CJ and they interrogated him. CJ told the investigators that Antonio wanted a gas can, but they never gave him. But later, he realized that he took the gas can and fled away. The investigators also learned that Antonio had another brother known as Pedro. So on the 12th January, the investigators brought Pedro in and they interrogated him as well. Pedro told the investigators that he had no knowledge of Antonio's whereabouts on the night of Saleha's murder. The investigators showed him a video of an unknown woman covering her head with a hood buying a gas at a gas station. Upon looking at the video keenly, Pedro recognized the woman as Cassandra Kimbrough, one of Antonio's girlfriends. Antonio's cell phone records proved to the investigators that Antonio had lied to them that he's with Cassandra at his house on the night of Saleha's murder. So the investigators began tracking down Antonio's lovers, who were now suspects, that is Cassandra Kimbrough and Angela Olson. On the 5th of January 2011, the investigators brought Angela Olson for questioning. They questioned her concerning her fight with Saleha. However, Angela told the investigators that Saleha had apologized to her for sending her threatening text messages, and they had put the incident behind them, so they aired out their differences at a club on Christmas night. Investigators searched her car, and they found a gas can. They asked her about the gas can, and she told them that she had it because her car broke down several months ago. She also told the investigators that on the 29th of December, the day Saleha disappeared, she was at work. Angela Olson was cleared off from the suspect list. On the 24th of January 2011, investigators learned that Cassandra had gotten a new driver's license with a new legal name. a different date of birth, an incomplete address, and a 6-inch height difference. So they brought Cassandra in for questioning. Cassandra was adamant that neither she nor Antonio had anything to do with Saleha's murder. She claims they were both at Antonio's place, enjoying each other's company. When the investigators searched her phone records, they found that her phone and Antonio's phone pinged at the scene where Saleha was murdered, so obviously she was lying. So on the 2nd of February 2011, police arrested Antonio Drayton and Cassandra Kimbrough and charged Antonio with first-degree murder of Saleha. Cassandra Kimbrough, on the other hand, was charged with accessory to first-degree murder. They were both charged with grand theft, abuse of a dead human body, tampering with physical evidence, and willful burning of lands. While in separate interrogation rooms at the police station, first, the investigators pressed Antonio. They confronted him with all the evidences. The napkin found at the crime scene came back with DNA evidence. It was Antonio Drayton's DNA. So they showed him the paper napkin, and they told him that his DNA were found all over the paper napkin. Antonio pointed his finger at Cassandra. He said Cassandra had gone over to his apartment, and Saleha was also there. An argument broke out between the two ladies, and it was so intense. So Cassandra took a fire extinguisher and hit Saleha over the head with it. She fell to the floor and got knocked out. Cassandra got on top of her and stood on her chest and strangled her to death with a belt. Antonio told the investigators that he only helped Cassandra to get rid of Saleha's body. He added that Cassandra later poured gasoline on Saleha's body, and he watched as she lit her on fire by the roadside. Investigators went over to the room that Cassandra was in. The investigators went to Cassandra's interrogation room, and they presented her with everything that Antonio said happened. Cassandra finally decided to tell the truth. He revealed that she didn't kill Saleha. On the 23rd of June 2011, Cassandra Kimbrough pleaded guilty that she only helped Antonio Drayton to dispose of and burn Saleha's body. She agreed to a plea deal to testify against Antonio. When Antonio found out that Cassandra was going to say everything and testify against him, he also took a plea deal, and so on. 24th of May 2012, Antonio was sentenced to 45 years in prison. Cassandra only got 2 years in prison with 8 years of community services.